Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. We hear you loud and clear.
And we'll get started here shortly as soon as we complete a sound check.
Hello, is there anybody here?
We are receiving audio. We can hear you. Is Assembly Member Salt on the line?
Mr. Salt, can you hear me and can you do a sound check and let us know if we can hear you? I'm guessing that's you, Mr. Salt. Is that true?
That is me. Thank you for the help. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're coming in a little bit loud. We're going to modulate the sound a bit, but otherwise we can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I now call to order this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly. It is Wednesday, August 17, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Miss Allard.
Here.
Mr. Salt.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Berdia.
Here.
Mr. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Cross,
Here.
Ms. LaFrance,
Here.
Mr. Constant,
Here.
Ms. Zolotel,
Ms. Zalatel is excused.
Mr. Dunbar,
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Here.
Mr. Boland,
Happy to be here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Aquino, would you come forward and lead us in the pledge, please?
Certainly, I'm happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Volan, would you read the land acknowledgement, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight, whether you are joining us in person or online. Our agenda for tonight has just one item of business, item 4A, MOA Emergency Homelessness Response. There is a laid on the table item, an unnumbered assembly resolution, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly establishing a task force to develop an emergency shelter plan for weather. Is there a motion and a second to lay this item on the table?
Move to lay on the table.
Second.
A motion to lay this unnumbered resolution on the table has been made by Mr. Rivera and seconded by Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you. So this is a timely resolution as every day that we don't have a resolution like this in place, we get closer to winter and we get closer to needing a emergency shelter plan. And as we saw earlier today at the Housing and Homelessness Committee, there is not one in place. So I urge my colleagues to vote yes on laying this item on the table, and then we can deliberate the merits of it at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to lay the unnumbered resolution on the table.
Mr. Salt,
Vote yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
The motion to lay this item on the table passes 11-0. This will be item 4A1. May I now have a motion to incorporate the laid on the table item into the agenda?
So moved. Second.
A motion to incorporate the item into the agenda has been made by Mr. Constant and seconded by Mr. Rivera, seeking unanimous consent. Seeing and hearing no opposition to the motion, the laid on the table item has been incorporated into the agenda. We now have item 4A1, unnumbered AR number 2022-XX, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly establishing a task force to develop an emergency shelter plan for cold weather. What is the will of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion to approve has been made by Mr. Rivera and seconded by Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to keep my introductory comments brief. So earlier today at the Assembly's Committee on Housing and Homelessness meeting, it became clear to me that the administration will not be able to put forward an adequate emergency sheltering plan for the upcoming winter. The number of complications this winter that an emergency sheltering plan needs to address is pretty astounding, including Centennial Park Campground, the Guest House Inn, and an increased inflow into the homelessness prevention response system and more. In my opinion, we can't afford to half-ass this, and we need to do this in a way that relies on the immense amount of expertise we have in the community. That's why Mr. Perez-Verdia and I have brought forward this resolution, because we gave the administration a chance to get it done, and they didn't. Too many lives are on the line for us to sit back, do nothing, and hope that the administration will get a plan to us by the end of the month. The resolution tasks the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness with convening a task force to create an emergency shelter plan for single adults with a deadline to get this plan to the Assembly and any appropriation requests that might go with the plan by September 22nd for consideration at the September 27th regular Assembly meeting. As we learned at the committee meeting earlier today, it took about a year of work and collaborating with multiple community partners to come up with a family emergency shelter plan. We've got to do this work on warp speed to make sure that we are ready for the time winter sets in. This body took the historic step on July 26th to forward fund emergency shelter needs. Now I hope this body will take another historic step to ask the natural community convener, the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, to bring together a group to get this plan done. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. With that, there are a few folks, as I understand it, who are available to answer questions. One of them is fairly time limited. I believe she has to leave soon, and that will be Lisa Aquino. So I think it would be appropriate, Madam Chair, if any members have questions or if Ms. Aquino wants to come up and speak, it would be appropriate to do that now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Aquino, would you mind coming up? I have a few questions for you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you again. It feels like it's been a long time. I'm Lisa Aquino, and I was formerly the CEO of Catholic Social Services.
Thank you. We find ourselves in a difficult place in terms of trying to address the very complex issues that are in front of us right now and a very short timeline. I'm glad you're here because I feel like that you've been here before in similar scenarios, and I guess I'd just like to hear you speak to your perspective around the importance of bringing community providers and leaders and experts together in order to develop a plan that actually has the possibility of working, and also just any insight you can provide to us about how we should or should not proceed forward. So I'd just love to hear any advice and thoughts you have about where we are and where we should go.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for asking. This is something that's really close to my heart, and so I'm here because I believe so much in this, and I know that it's possible. And I just want to say that although I know that it feels like this is a hard moment, I know that this must be a hard conversation, and I can tell. I haven't been as involved, but I can tell. But I'll just tell you that in my experience, that's been the case every year. It's been the case every year that I've been involved in homeless services. There's always been this very challenging conversation that needs to be had about what are we going to do about emergency cold weather shelter for adults in this city. And what is hopeful to me about it this time is that it's August, right? It's not October. And so we're having this conversation in August, so I just want to commend all of you and commend the administration for that. You know, that's good. Let's focus on what's good here, and that's really good. Another great thing is it sounds like there's funding available to do something. That has not always been the case. And I have been before this body begging for something to happen, for someone to put some money towards this. in other years. And so it feels hopeful to me that there's funding for this. It's August, we still have a minute. You can pull something together in that time. It's possible. We've done it before. It's not easy, but there's people in this community that know how to do this. So I would just, besides being the CEO of Catholic Social Services, I was the chair of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness for many years. I was the chair of the advisory committee for that, so represent all the providers, our group within the coalition. And so I will just tell you from that seat, I know that there are experts in this community. There's people who are providing the service. I'm sitting with them. They're here in the audience, and they can provide so much experience in this conversation. So I'm really, I believe this approach of having a task force and bringing the experts in the community together with the experts from the administration, with the experts from other places to create a solution can really work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. And there are 3 other members in the queue. I'll go through the queue, and they may have questions for you as well.
Okay.
Mr. Follin?
Well, thank you for your comments. It's Ms. Aquino.
Yes.
I really appreciate the critical nature of having a plan for our emergency cold weather response. And I do support the majority of the main motion here. I do have a question for the movers. Is that appropriate for me to ask, or should I wait?
Actually, if we could I'll just go through the queue and see if anyone else has
Sure.
questions.
Okay, and then I'll stand by.
For Ms. Aquino, and then I'll come back
Thanks.
to you.
Yep.
Mr. Rivera?
No.
Mr. Cross? For Ms. Aquino?
Thank you, Ms. Aquino. So it's my understanding that basically based on your experience, we've never had a cold weather emergency plan in place, one that we've implemented?
I mean, I don't want to say never.
Okay.
And what I want to say is that when I first started at Catholic Social Services, there wasn't a strategy then. And so at that point, that was Catholic Social Services putting 240 people into Brother Francis shelter, which literally means people have this much space between them. And then the overflow was 120 people in the Beans Cafe building that was operated with a seasonal employee and a volunteer. It wasn't a safe situation, and we were in that situation because previous to that, there hadn't been a cold weather shelter plan, and my predecessor, when someone died in the winter because they were sleeping outside, went to that mayor and asked for that bit of money for that seasonal person and to rent beans. So since then, so much great work has happened. So many different things have come online, and there's so many other opportunities. But I'll say that there have been different iterations of winter shelter that have happened since then, and it could be its own book.
Yeah, what it sounds like is what you're saying is there was less of a plan and more of a reaction response in the
Yes.
past. And so this is our
Yes.
opportunity to resolve that, but that goes back a long time. I guess my next question is can you speak to, being time of the essence, have you identified other cities, because we're not the only ones with cold weather, who have a cold weather response plan that we can closely monitor or we can mock in rapid succession, so that we're just identifying facilities, but we see what processes they're using?
You know, that's a great question, and we did look, we have talked to other cities and looked at other cities and looked at what other places did. I remember that there was a conversation with Duluth, Minnesota, some other different places. I think that Anchorage, at the time when I was working in this field, was unique in that there was so little shelter available. So there was no year-round shelter. There's hardly any year-round shelter. So it's difficult to turn on a bunch of new shelter when there's not anything ongoing. And that was what made us a little different than some of the comparisons. But I think there are good examples out there of how other places do it.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Next is Mr. Constant.
Thank you, and this might be a question for Robin.
Sure.
One of you. It's maybe a little obtuse, but just at the beginning or before this meeting, somebody asked the question of, is the, quote, navigation center, end quote, operating at 3rd Avenue now?
That is a question for Robin.
Yeah.
Robin Dempsey is the CEO at Catholic Social Services.
Hi, thanks for the question. No, it's not. It's under construction right
Thank you.
now, and I think we don't anticipate it opening until December, sometime in
That was good. So that was what my answer was, but now I have it confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Allard, any questions for Ms. Aquino?
Yes, thank you. So today we had a homeless committee meeting, and we received an email from the administration, and I wanted to read this to you, and I think it would be, I want to know your response and your reaction to it, and then I think you need to have a seat at this table.
Okay.
All right? So it was asked if we have a cold weather emergency shelter plan that's coming from the administration. The administration says they're in the final stages of development,
Okay.
which is probably a first of an administration, and it will be done by the end of the month.
Okay.
Then we asked the administration, how many people will this be able to hold? The administration responded between 150 and 250 people.
Okay.
Then they went on to ask if the locations of these facilities will be identified in the cold weather plan. They said yes. It'll be private locations, or private and public facilities. So we are going to have this coming forward, and I really do have to commend the administration, because I haven't seen another administration ever have a cold weather plan in place. So I want to reassure you there.
Thank you.
Would you like to have that, and I'll work with the administration, I'm sure the other assembly members will too, to have you have a seat at that table, that if you feel that something needs to be tweaked, we can work with that. What are your thoughts on what the administration's coming out? And when I say the end of the month, we're already at the 17th of the month.
Right.
So we're talking just...
Yeah. Yeah, so I wasn't at that meeting, and I don't know, I haven't been following all of this, so I don't know. I absolutely would be happy to help in any way that I can. I'm no longer in this business. I'm not a service provider any longer. So I wouldn't, I could speak from my experience previously, but I would say that it's so important that the voices of the current service providers are involved in this, because it's really hard to make a plan without having an operator. And if there's no operator identified who's willing to step into this space, then that's really challenging. And I have no idea. Maybe the administration's, I'm sure they're thinking about that too. But that would be my, I would just want to make sure that all those voices could really be heard and be at the table. Sometimes I feel like, and I bet you get this, that there's decades of valuable experience providing these services in this community, and people don't ask for that input. They don't get those voices to the table, and I think it's just a shame, because this is the kind of field where you learn in the doing. There's not a bunch of research, it's not written up in a book yet. I wish, in my spare time. Anyway.
Chair, may I just follow up really quick? Thank you, and I will work really hard to see if we can get your voice heard in that, if there's anything, and if there's not somebody who's operating that specific point that you brought up. Yeah. And I know that this AR is pushing to try to force the hand of the administration to, and it's not in a negative way, I don't mean it like that, but for us to say, okay, we want this to happen, but you have to come too. And that's what this AR is about, is to say we have a deadline and we need to meet it. So thank you.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Presverdia, do you have more questions for Ms. Aquino?
Yeah, I just have one, and I appreciate you being here, and I realize that you're not currently, engaged in this work right now. So I'm glad you're here, because I think you serve as somebody who has been in it in the past, and so we can learn from our past. And so I just want to build on what Ms. Allard and you were just talking about, that we learned today at the homeless committee meeting that CSS, Salvation Army, Beans, the Coalition, the Continuum of Care, none of them have been contacted and have been involved in any development of a plan. And so to your point, if a plan, in your experience in the past, is going to have any possibility of success, can it be done in isolation without the involvement of these providers and these experts?
In my experience, having the service providers as a part of the planning and the solution is critical to the long-term success of any project in homeless services. These are the folks that really know how this works on the ground. I also recognize that as a person who is doing that, it can be very tunnel vision because every day, all the time is about that, and it has to be to get that done. But those providers really know what's happening, and they're critical to know how to make the plan work.
Thank you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia, and thank you, Ms. Aquino. I don't see any other members with questions. So again, thanks so much for being here tonight. I'll go back to Mr. Volan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question for the drafters of this AR is on Section 4. The task force shall consider the feasibility of utilizing the sprung structure at a temporary location other than Tudor and Elmore for emergency shelter purposes. Although I understand that the facilitated working group has essentially broken down and the moderators left, and so I don't think that that's a conversation that is still going on. It seemed to me that was a component that had a lot of public process behind it. I remember attending a couple of the listening sessions, and there was a lot of discussion about the work that went into identify a site and whittle it down from, I think it was 10 original proposals. Obviously, my concern with this, with the district that I represent, is how hard downtown has been hit. And as we heard earlier, there's going to be a navigation center coming online on 3rd. So I'm not sure that I support the inclusion of Section 4, but I would like to hear a little bit about the rationale behind it.
Sure, Madam Chair, may I? Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, Section 4, so we have an asset that is going to be here, I think, any week now. So it's going to be on the way, and I think it's a valuable asset. I don't see any reason why we would just want that asset to waste away. And if it can be used in a temporary way for emergency sheltering purposes, then I don't know why we wouldn't consider that as one of the possible tools in our toolbox to address this upcoming need that we're going to have. I will say the wording in here is very specific, right? It says you're going to consider this, you're going to see if it's feasible to use this at a location other than Tudor and Elmore, because we want to stay away from frankly, the politicization of that location, because it is a political location, and see if we want to use it somewhere else. The task force will provide recommendations on where it could be used, and then I imagine that would have to go through its own, I guess depending on where the site is, it'd have to go through its own public process, and potentially the body would be able to say yes or no in the end to that usage. So that is my perspective of why that language is there. I will say, if the members from North Anchorage are concerned about sort of the continuation of including more facilities in North Anchorage, I would be fine with an amendment to, it already excludes Tudor and Elmore, to exclude the North Anchorage district entirely. I would be fine with that.
We have Q.
Thank you, Mr. Volan. Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Rivera?
Thanks. So I guess two quick things. First is response to a comment from one of my colleagues, and just to give a little bit of historical perspective. So the Assembly on July 26th appropriated dollars to forward fund emergency sheltering for single adults, as well as emergency sheltering for families. And the single adults appropriation item required the development of an emergency sheltering plan to come before the body. So I just want to make it super clear that I doubt if we hadn't allocated money to forward fund emergency sheltering and require a plan that we would have a plan in front of us, or even be talking about a plan, frankly. So I just want to make sure that's fairly clear on the record. And then second thing, just wanted to bring up that we have a couple of other community experts who are here and who can speak as well if folks have questions. We have Jessica Parks, who can speak, and we also have Jasmine Boyle, who can speak as well, the former executive director of the Coalition to End Homelessness. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Next is Mr. Solt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess a question for those putting forward this resolution. Why are we not considering the Elmore location? Again, as was stated, it's been vetted throughout a pretty extensive process, I thought, and came out to be one of the more suitable locations for, I guess, a sprung structure. Is there a particular reason other than it's been politicized why we wouldn't use this particular location? Thank you.
I can speak a little bit to it just from my own experience. So first, I don't believe it has been vetted, and I think that there's a great deal of question as to the feasibility of that location for a lot of reasons, whether it's the distance, whether it's the amount of woods around it. There's a variety of reasons, but I think more so that the solutions that this task force needs to come up with need to address immediate solutions, and that project is planned to not be completed until next year. So what we want to do is make sure that this asset is on the table and being considered. The location of Tudor and Elmore is highly controversial and complicated for a lot of reasons, and trying to avoid that and get to a solution for this winter is the intent. So that was the intent of trying to avoid that, and trying to get to something that we can get put up very, very soon.
Thank you, Mr. Presverdia. Mr. Solt, did you have any follow-up?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solt. Mr. Cross?
Thank you. I want to build off what Cameron stated. And I'm going to answer part of Randy's question. When we did the Navigation Center, I was wildly opposed to it at first, so I rigorously researched why they picked that site. And I would, I think the opposite based on what I studied as far as the location Navigation Center. Lot size, level, you may not realize, but that evidence lot was actually had utilities picked in, and at one point in the past there was intention of building a structure there. So the soils were prepped and it's basically ready build dirt. There's no need to bring in extra fill. There's no drainage issues with the lot. It was what they identified as being the most readily available, along with zoning, utility usage, the three-phase electric, everything they needed. Owning the land, it being part of the APD. Yes, is it the perfect spot? No, but as far as what we needed to have readily available, I remember it being that was the best spot. We had turned down other properties in the past, and then once we, basically you're with your back against the wall, this is the best option we have after we said no to other places in the past. So from my studies on it, after I researched it, I went from a hard no, and I ended up voting for the Navigation Center. I guess my next question is regarding sites, just speaking directly to this ordinance here, a resolution, forgive me. When we are looking at facilities, and I guess maybe you've had some conversations, and maybe this is for Felix, I just want to know, when we do this task force, what options or what conversations you had. Are you reconsidering Sullivan Arena? Are you reconsidering Golden Lion, although they tell us that's not an option specifically for treatment? I mean, we just vacated Sullivan Arena. Is that back on our radar for an emergency response location within this ordinance? Within this resolution?
May I, Madam Chair? Thank you, Madam Chair. So I can't answer that question because I haven't had those conversations about the possible facilities that could be used. I mean, from my perspective, the task force should look at all available public and private facilities to accomplish the goal of providing adequate emergency shelter. So I think harping on a specific location at this time before the task force has even had a chance to do its work, I think is a bit premature.
Thank you. I guess we will all be sitting here looking as both the administration and this assembly board will look pretty ridiculous if after we chase everybody out, we have to put them right back in. And I hope that we can come to some fantastic solutions to this. I do support this, by the way. I just have those specific questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. So 2 things. One, back to the question that Mr. Salt asked. I don't think anything changes for the location of the long-term plan, but I think that their purpose for Section 4 was to talk about a short-term use. And to the point that Mr. Volland made that I agree with, I just want to make sure that it's not because I don't want the record to suggest that it's a NIMBY issue, that, we have the following in very close location to each other, half of which are new. That's the Brother Francis Shelter and the new Navigation Center, the guest house that's coming on and has been used, potentially Aptel, the Aviator, the Sockeye, the Hope Center. Then you have the old standbys, the Anchorage Correctional Facility, the Cordova House, all the GEO facilities, all tightly compacted within a small area. So I know I don't need to hammer that message home with the members of this body because people know, but I want to make sure the record is clear why, not just because we don't want it, but because we need help.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Ms. Allard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to read this section right here. It says, the task force shall be convened by Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness Director Meg Zolotel, who shall determine its membership from a broad array of providers, stakeholders, organizations, municipal agencies, meet public, and provide prior public notice of its meetings. Seriously? Then the third section reads, excuse me, the task force shall consider specific populations-based solutions that decrease the need for larger facilities, i.e. specialized shelter for elders, LGBTQIA, etc. Really? Do we not count as everybody? So we have disabled we left out, BIPOC we left out, women we left out. This is a ridiculous AR, and we already have a cold weather program that's coming from the administration. I mean, we already have a location, which is Elmore, which no explanation has been given other than the fact we don't want to help the mayor put in the cold weather facility or a facility that will house up to 280 individuals on Elmore. We sit here every day, all the time, arguing that the administration isn't doing anything to come on board and work with us. But yet we're not doing anything to come on board and work with them. It goes both ways. Anything the administration brings forward, we override it. Anything the administration wants to compromise or come forward, we argue. There is no compromising. This body does not compromise unless it's their way. So I'm going to be a hard no on this resolution because I just think it's full of holes. I think it's an absolute ethics issue that Meg Zolotel is leading the charge, and here she is funneling money again to decide what happens with other organizations and nonprofits. And I have a real
That is out of
concern.
order.
And why am I out of order exactly? I'm
Ms.
speaking about the director to the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. That is the position. Why am I out of order?
You are speaking in regards to a member who is already
No, I wasn't. I was speaking about the director to end
regarding
homelessness.
her conflict.
Absolutely
Please
not.
refrain
It
from
doesn't matter.
speaking about that.
Okay,
Thank
go
you.
ahead and cover up for it. Ethics violation again.
Ms. Allard?
That was Nuria Clark.
Nuria,
You are warned.
You are warned. You need to stop or you will be escorted out.
Nope, that's your second warning.
Second warning, security, please escort Ms. Clark out as she has refused to stop shouting and is creating an actual disruption of this meeting.
The blessings of Jamie Allard.
Ms. We are now reconvening and back in the meeting. Mr. Constant, you're in the queue.
Thank you. I just want to say that any member who suggests that this body has been unwilling to work with the mayor simply needs to show up to a committee meeting where the administration doesn't show up, or simply needs to attend any number of work sessions where the administration doesn't show up. In fact, I think the simple message is waiting for the administration is waiting for Godot. That's the bottom line in all of this. The bottom line is we can't wait anymore for them to put forward some project that makes any sense, because they continue to say tomorrow, 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 another day. Now, I want to make sure that the record that's recorded here is very clear that when the member from Eagle River purported to read from the resolution, she didn't read from the resolution. She read in part from the resolution and then took creative license to add language that she thought needed to be in there. And so there were no names mentioned in this resolution. There is, in fact, in opposition to what was stated, again, inaccurately by the member from Eagle River, that this resolution somehow directs funding. It does not. No funding appropriated with this document. And so we find ourselves in a position where facts don't matter, only raising ire matters, because that's how some people have figured the public process best works for them. And so I reject any notion that this is out of order or out of line or in some way does what the administration is already doing. And the proof, of course, as they say, is in the pudding. So I look forward to seeing the plan that comes from the administration to see how effectively it bridges the resources in this community into an effective system that's going to take care of the needs of the individuals who are currently living in mud.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Before we move on, I am warning the two women in the back on the right here, the woman in the green and the woman next to her, to please refrain from shouting or making any disruptive noises. Moving through the queue, next is Mr. Solt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On record, and not defending the administration for, I'll say I certainly could do a better job of communicating, do a better job of involving other local entities in the plan. But I do think it is unfair that we're calling them out in the manner that we are, given that no prior administration has put forth a plan. It's not an excuse as to why this administration, like any previous one, hasn't put forth a plan yet. So I too will be waiting with bated breath and very interested in whatever plan that is put forth by the administration. And I do hope that this is the first administration to put one forward, although I will also agree time is getting short. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Solt. Next is Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's our meeting, and if the administration doesn't want to attend at the last minute, I don't think they have to. We're the body. We could decide on what's going on. We don't need our hands held by the administration. We complain all the time they don't participate, but yet when they do, we berate them. So we can have our own meetings. We're the assembly body. We're big boys and girls. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Volan?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to point out we're at 5:47, and I think we're noticed until 6. Can I make a motion to? No? Okay. Well, I do want to make a motion to amend Section 4, line 39 through 41. I would like to add, after purposes, comma, paying careful attention not to further exacerbate the concentration of services in any one area.
Second.
Second.
So a motion has been made by Mr. Volin to add on line 41, page 2. Would you repeat that again, Mr.
Yes.
Volin? And it's been seconded by Mr. Constant.
Paying careful attention not to further exacerbate the concentration of services in any one area.
So the amendment begins on line 41. After purposes or changes the period to a comma, paying careful attention not to further exacerbate the concentration of services in any one area. Correct?
Right, correct.
Okay, and again, that has been seconded by Mr. Constant. Would you like to speak further to that, Mr. Volin?
Yes, I just think if we are going to even consider a temporary location for the sprung structure, we just have to take into account parts of our Anchorage community that have had to bear the brunt of homelessness, and in good faith, I want to consider other districts as well as North Anchorage.
Thank you, Mr. Volin. Is there any discussion on the amendment? I see, Mr. Cross, you were in the queue for the main motion, or actually, Ms. Quinn Davidson is in the queue for the main motion. Are you in the queue for the main motion?
I am, and but I do want to speak to Mr. Volin's amendment. And I guess my only concern is, I concur with your concern, and this is an emergency response. And my only concern with your amendment is, when it's an emergency and we're facing freezing temperatures, we have to, again, all hands on deck. And we don't look at, well, that's unfair to them, so we just allow them to sit outside for a couple more days. I think at this point, the emergency response has to take in, what are the resources and where are they? Because if it suddenly drops to 15 below, we are going to get real desperate real fast. So that's my only concern. Oh, that's my only concern. Thank you. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. On the amendment, Mr. Constant? Okay.
Thank you. So Mr. Volin's language first was in North Anchorage, and I asked him to consider broadening it slightly, because I can imagine where all of a sudden we're setting up this structure at Centennial, or we're setting up this structure exactly in the places where we have started to create concentrations that are really harmful to neighborhoods by virtue of the sheer volume of people that were driving there. And so while I appreciate the argument that, it's all hands on deck, we have to be very cautious not to return to the broken system that we had before, because if we're not careful, we recreate what failed us as a community. And so that's for this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Perez-Verdia on the amendment.
I'm in for the main motion, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. Seeing no other members in the queue for the amendment, members may proceed to vote on the amendment to add at line 41 on page 2 after, quote, purpose, the phrase, paying careful attention not to further exacerbate the concentration of services in any one area.
Mr. Salt on the amendment.
Vote yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Salt, could you repeat that?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The amendment passes 10-1. I'll go back through the queue on the main motion as
Point
amended.
of order. I think we're almost at the end of our notice time, 5:53. I'd like to move to extend the meeting by 15 minutes.
Second.
A motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes has been made by Member Volin. It has been seconded by Mr. Constant. Seeking unanimous consent, is there any opposition to the motion to extend for 15 minutes? Seeing and hearing none, we are extended until 6:15. I will go back through the queue, starting with Ms. Quinn-Davidson, then Mr. Dunbar, then Mr. Cross, Mr. Constant, and Mr. Perez-Verdia. Ms. Quinn-Davidson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak a little bit to how the process used to work, and I think it's important for all of us to recognize that the municipality's involvement in homelessness has changed drastically, particularly over the last, well, since I've been on the body, which has been 4 years now, but particularly over the last couple of years. And this written plan is not necessarily always a written plan about what we're going to do, but there has been, over these past few years, immense coordination between the health department and all of the providers. We've had shelters that we knew either did or did not have space, and we've been able to brainstorm and collaborate with other parties. And really, this dearth of collaboration and this failure of the administration to be a leader and a partner on one of the most important issues in our city is notable from past administrations, having been through that myself. So I just wanted to make that clear, since it seemed like there was some confusion with other members about what had occurred in the past. And I think that members were perhaps misunderstanding Ms. Aquino's point, which was we've come a long way in the last few years. We have ARPA funding now. We're on the precipice of finding these solutions, and we're actually making strides. But we've got this dead weight hanging on our back, and it's an administration that can't get its job done. So I will be supporting this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn-Davidson. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I call the question.
Second.
A motion to call the question has been made by Mr. Dunbar and seconded by Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
I'm in the queue. It is.
This is not a debatable motion, so we will proceed to the vote. A supermajority is required with 8 votes.
Can I appeal to the maker of the motion to hold for one more amendment that needs to be made?
Madam Chair, point of order.
Go ahead, Ms. Allard.
Maybe it's more of a point of information. If this is not debatable, then why would anybody from the body?
You're correct, Mr. Constant. That is out of order, as this is not a debatable motion.
A mover could still say, I rescind my motion.
Mr. Constant, thank you. Members may proceed to vote on the motion to call the question, which stops debate. And then the body, if there are 8 votes, will proceed to a vote on the main motion as amended.
Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn-Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The motion to call the question fails 7-4. I will proceed back through the queue. Mr. Cross?
Thank you. Actually, I just wanted to say why I actually am going to support this. And the reason I support this is because I want to be part of the solution. Okay? I can admit that it would be great if the administration was at the homeless and housing meeting today, as well as here, so we can find out what's been done. I do agree with Allard that she says this kind of forces their hand, and that we're getting them, that hopefully this will inspire engagement, and because time is of the essence. But I also want to make sure that you understand I want to be part of the solution because the problem does not lay entirely at the feet of the administration. Granted, there are complications, but this is a problem much greater that is extended beyond just the last year and a half. This is a problem that was created years ago with the way that this assembly and this board that I sit on and the legislation that we passed that dramatically increased the poverty, the alcoholism, the depression, the issues that we're dealing with. And I just am voting this because anything I can do to be part of the solution, I will warmly embrace. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. I move to amend on page 2 to strike the whereas at the top lines 2, 3, and 4. If I could get a second, I'll say why.
Second for purposes of discussion.
Thank you.
Seconded by Mr. Volin. Go ahead, Mr. Constant.
Yes, so after the committee meeting today, I had a conversation with the operators of the Aviator, and they were concerned that a message might get out that they're intending to somehow have 200 people leave that site anytime in the near future. And so this whereas clause is factually incorrect in the sense that they're not intending to move people out. So for the purpose of making sure this document is accurate, I'm asking to remove that one whereas statement. 2.
This is the whereas statement on the top of page 2, lines 2, and then into 4.
Yep.
Hey, Chris, I think Meg's over here trying to send you a message. She doesn't want you to do that.
I made the motion, and it's been seconded, and I support the motion. And I ask you to support the motion.
And please, members, put yourselves in the queue if you wish to speak. Mr. Perez-Verdia on the amendment?
No, I'm in for the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to delete the whereas lines 2, 3, and 4 on page 2.
Mr. Solt?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Mr. Dunbar is excused.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
No.
Mr. Peterson?
No.
The amendment passes 6-4. Or, oh, we need 7. Old habits, we need 7 for a simple majority as we are a body of 12 now. So the amendment...
Then let me fix that.
The amendment fails 6-4. We are now back on the main motion as amended. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Thank you. I encourage my colleagues to pass this. The 2 points, one was brought up a bit by Ms. Quinn Davidson, that when I use the word plan, I, at the very minimum, mean that the administration is working with the community to find solutions to the challenges that we face. And we heard clearly today by a number of providers, even providers that were asked to help with Centennial, that there has been no collaboration, no communication. And I will say that what we find ourselves in is a redo of what happened at Sullivan. A month before Sullivan was going to close, providers were begging the administration for a plan. There were ideas, there were things that were in place, and they ignored them and did not collaborate and did not coordinate with all of the experts that were around. Beans Cafe got hours notice about Centennial. What we find ourselves in is repeating what's happened in the past, is an administration that is working in isolation and is not collaboratively working with others. I want them to be at the table. I want them to be at the table with us and with the community to find real solutions to this crisis that we find ourselves in right now. And so I want to encourage my colleagues to pass this and let's get to the table and let's have a conversation and let's develop a plan and let's do this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez-Verdia. I've got two other members in the queue, and apparently Mr. Byrd. I would ask that folks please be brief. We are running out of time. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, you know, I support this principle and this vehicle until it had an untruth in it. And so I'm forced to vote no.
Mr. Byrd, are you speaking on behalf of the mayor?
Hi, Madam Chair. This is Mr. Byrd. Can you hear me?
Yes, and you are speaking on behalf of the mayor?
No, Madam Chair. Through the chair, I just wanted to, number one, say that I was on the line, and I'm technically a member of the administration, so I just wanted that to be part of the record.
Thank you.
And I apologize. I've been at a budget meeting and I wasn't able to attend in person. And, the other thing I wanted to point out was that
Mr. Byrd, thank you. Members are aware you are online, and so if there are questions for the Department of Law, we will turn to you. Thank you, sir. Ms. Allard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question in regards to, if Mr. Byrd could please answer.
Go ahead.
So Mr. Byrd has some information in regards to the main motion of this, and I'd like to hear his opinion, please.
through the chair, the only thing I wanted to point out is that I think the Assembly has the power and the authority to create a task force. There are separation of powers issues to the extent that the Assembly would seek to administer government in a way that's reserved to the executive branch. So I know that the text of this resolution indicates that a task force is being created. I think the text of it is fine, but I've heard some of the members talk about taking some of the things and, for example, the NAV center tent or what the structure is, I'm not sure what it's called, but using that in a different location. I just want to highlight that that is an issue to the extent that the task force would seek to administer.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Solt, and then I'm hoping we can get to a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to propose an amendment to Section 2 to include the mayor's office, the administration office. Whether they accept that or not is up to them, but I think if we want to have them involved in the process and push communication, I think that should be included in the task force, or at least given the option to be included.
If that's an amendment, I second it.
An amendment has been made by Mr. Solt to add, I'm sorry, what to Section 2 and on what line, please? Mr. Solt, it's been seconded by Ms. Allard. Would you repeat your amendments?
So let's put it on line 34, new sentence. An offer shall be extended to the administration to put forth a member for the task force.
An offer shall be extended to the administration to put forth an offer to the task force, a member to the task force.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
We are almost out of time. Is there a motion to extend? Okay. The clock on the wall is not accurate. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Solt, on your motion to amend, which has been seconded by Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something that we've all said, we want this to be collaborative. We want the mayor to, or the administration, executive branch, to involve others And I want to make sure that this resolution does the same, that we at least make the offer to have them participate. They may not choose to participate, but I think that's probably the best way to put that wording, other than, obviously the Coalition to End Homelessness could choose the executive branch in the mayor's office, but I kind of want to put a little more teeth in there to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salt. Mr. Cross?
Actually, what Randy just said makes sense. They just want to make sure that the administration is involved. I was thinking that municipal agencies would include that, but I see that first sentence, what you're referring to is that the ACEH shall determine membership, and being clear that that they can't exclude the administration, I think, is your intent of that verbiage. Is that correct, Randy?
That is correct. They could choose not to include the mayor's office, and I'll just make sure that we definitely make that offer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to add at the end of the sentence, page 2, section 2, an offer shall be extended to the administration to be a member of the task force. Members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Salt?
Yes?
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
The motion passes 10-0. We now have the main motion as amended. Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to approve item 4A1.
Mr. Salt?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Item 4A1 passes 8-2. This now brings us to audience participation. Welcome. If you would state your name for the record, your community council, or the area of the community in which you live, you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Dustin Darden. I'm in the area of the community of state of Alaska. I'm in Kelly Shabaka's district in the state of Alaska. She's running for the statesman for the state to regulate order in our land. It's a good lady, Shabaka. Now, the notion of this is, you guys, I'm going to have to phrase it in such a way that you don't interrupt me, and I appreciate if you'd refrain from interrupting my constitutional ability to petition you with my vehement opposition of this garbage languageality which you're presenting today, respectfully, through the chair, to the vice chair, who might have an idea. You guys are making the assumption that humans don't have the ability to keep themselves warm. And you're subjugating a certain class of people to your control, which is preposterous. And you're putting some kind of limits on what this group is and the specifications of what kind of sexual organs they identify with having or thinking they have or thinking they might want to have. This is insane. This is completely irrational and insane. And furthermore, you talk about, I look at you like little kids that are up there playing in the sandbox with pine cones to just try and make some rational sense out of what you are doing. And I'm repulsed by your presence, and being close to you puts me in fear of my life, because I feel like the fire of God is going to fall down and consume the corrupt, disgusting behavior which you're displaying. And I just want to distance myself from you for that specific reason. You know, what you're doing to the children, what you're doing to homeless people in captivity, you know, holding people against their will, injecting bioweapons into their arms. It just goes on and on and on and on. And you're missing the point. You're missing the reason why Christ came. He's the solution to this. He multiplied the bread. He healed the sick. He didn't put the power into the government.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left for one more speaker. If you come forward, state your name and your community council or area of the community in which you live.
Good afternoon. I live in Chugach, Eagle River, and my name is Jasmine Boyle. I'm the former executive director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. Just wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you all. It has been an incredible pleasure to work with many of you for several years on this important issue. I did just want to share some perspective. This is absolutely not a new problem in Anchorage, and I believe that was discussed. This is not a problem that we were unaware of and failing to participate in a solution around. I think it's important to recognize that with previous administrations, we had Nancy Burke serving in the mayor's office, which meant we had a direct point of contact to talk to on a daily basis. When I helped write Anchored Home, we spoke to 2,000 people in the community through dozens of community engagement sessions, and there were 4 of us who literally wrote Anchored Home: Nancy Burke, myself, Michelle Brown, who was at United Way at the time, and Dr. Richard Monsager, who worked at United Way. We took that draft to the public. We talked to thousands of people to get input. And granted, that was prior to COVID, and homelessness has increased because of the economic devastation of COVID. At some point, we've got to stop politicizing this and pointing fingers because people are dying outside. It is unacceptable that I had staff coaching a mother through labor in that camp. It is unacceptable that we have people in wheelchairs in that camp. It is unacceptable that we don't have HMIS data in that camp because that ruins eligibility for the few housing programs we do have. This is not a new problem. When I have construction needs at my house, I hire a construction worker because he or she knows more than I do. The person knows more than I do about assembling that. So I just want to second what Lisa said. This is not a new problem. We did have winter overflow plans every year. Nancy Burke is always available through United Way to share that historic perspective. People are dying. Please put the politics down and invite those of us who now know how to do this and don't give a hoot about the politics, but care about the human beings that need us to show up and add our voice. Please invite us. When the new administration was elected, I spoke to Mayor Bronson, I spoke to Amy, I spoke to every member of the assembly and said, I'm not a political person in a political role. My personal life is my personal life. I will hand you the work. I will provide the subject matter expertise. Just include the providers. That did not happen, and we are here. Please invite the providers into this space. I think this is a fantastic step forward. But I also think we need people with lived experience in this room talking to you because they are suffering. And I do appreciate this momentous step, and I appreciate you all for dealing with this very complicated, hairy, and contentious issue. And I certainly stand by to volunteer my personal time to assist in whatever way would be additive.
Thank you for your participation. We are out of time and are automatically adjourned when we run out of time. Thank you all for being here tonight.